The moment the silver name card hit the floor and was ground beneath a polished leather heel, I didn't get angry. I simply looked at my watch. It was exactly 8:14 p.m. The young man smirking in front of me had no idea he had just signed the death warrant of his family's multi-billion-dollar empire. My name is Lawrence Sinclair. I am 58 years old, and after 3 decades of navigating the sharp, unforgiving waters of venture capital, I've learned that the loudest people in the room are usually the most fragile. We were sitting at Table 3, the premier VIP sections of the Crawford Holdings annual gala. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, crystal glasses clinking, and the low hum of sycophantic conversations. My assistant, Audrey Mercer, sat to my left, reviewing the final terms of a $1.3 billion capital injection on her tablet. The deal was set to be finalized the next morning, a lifeline that Crawford Holdings desperately needed to survive a looming debt crisis. Then Adrian Crawford arrived. At 26 years old, he carried the title of Vice President of Business Development, a position handed to him solely because of his last name. He was accompanied by a young woman dripping in diamonds, her nose tilted upward as if the very air in the room wasn't clean enough for her. Adrian didn't ask. He didn't look at the seating chart. He walked straight to our table and tapped his fingers on the polished mahogany. "This seat is taken," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I didn't look up from my glass of water. "Correct," I replied calmly. "I am sitting in it." He let out a dry, mocking chuckle. "It's for my girlfriend. You and your assistant should head to the general guest section in the back." "Ma'am, sir, you don't belong here." Before Audrey or I could say a word, Adrian reached down, grabbed my custom-engraved silver name card from the table, and tossed it onto the marble floor. Then, with deliberate slowness, he ground his heel into it, scratching the metal and leaving a dark, dusty smudge over my name. Audrey stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Excuse me? Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" Adrian ignored her completely. He pulled the chair out for his girlfriend, gesturing for her to sit down as if we were nothing more than empty space. The girlfriend smiled, a victorious, smug expression on her face. Around us, the chatter at neighboring tables began to quiet down. The glitz of the gala faded as guests began to notice the confrontation. Several phones were raised, cameras rolling, capturing every second of the interaction. I bent down, picked up the bent, dirty name card, and set it back on the table. I looked Adrian dead in the eye. My voice was quiet, steady, and devoid of any anger. "You shouldn't have done that," I said. He laughed, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "And what are you going to do about it? Call security?" "My mother owns the security company. She owns this entire hotel. She owns the company you're trying to leech off of." "What you just did," I said, ensuring my voice was clear enough for the recording phones to pick up, "just cost your mother exactly $1.3 billion. Adrian's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. But his arrogance quickly returned. "Let's get my mother down here then," he sneered. "Let's see if she can help you understand your place in this city." Audrey looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Lawrence, we should leave," she whispered. "This is a waste of your time." I raised a hand slightly, signaling her to remain calm. I stayed in my seat, waiting. The crowd around us was silent now, watching the drama unfold. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed. "Mom, get down to table 3 right now. There is some stubborn middle-aged man squatting in our VIP seats claiming he has $1 billion. He is making a scene." The atmosphere in the room shifted before Vivian Crawford even entered. The crowd parted like water. Vivian walked in with the posture of someone who believed she was untouchable. She was 55 years old, dressed in a custom designer gown, her face a mask of absolute authority. "What is the meaning of this?" Vivian asked, her voice cold as ice. Adrian pointed at me. "This man is refusing to move, Mom. He's ruining the evening for us." Vivian's eyes swept over me. Her gaze was quick, dismissive, and utterly blind. She didn't look at the scratched name card on the table, nor did she recognize the face of the man her office had spent the last 4 weeks sending urgent, desperate invitations to. To her, I was just an older man in a plain suit who didn't fit the profile of her wealthy friends. "I am afraid this section is reserved for our elite partners," Vivian said, her tone dripping with fake politeness. "Security, please escort this gentleman and his associate out through the service exit." "We do not tolerate disruptions," Audrey stepped forward. "We have an official invitation from your chief investment officer. We are here representing Sinclair Capital." Vivian raised her hand, cutting Audrey off mid-sentence. "I do not care who you claim to represent. Security, do your job. Two large guards stepped forward, placing their hands near their holsters. Adrian smirked, pulling the chair out further. "Sit down, babe," he told his girlfriend. "The trash has been cleared." I didn't resist. I stood up slowly, adjusting my suit jacket. I picked up the ruined name card one last time, looking at Vivian Crawford. "You won't remember this night the way you think you will, Vivian," I said softly. "You will remember it as the exact minute you lost Crawford Holdings." She didn't even bother to respond. She turned her back to me, already scanning the room for more important guests. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, Audrey following close behind. Behind us, the classical music started playing again, and the sound of clinking glasses returned. But the damage was already done. As we walked through the glass lobby and out into the cool night air, I pulled out my phone. "Cancel the wire transfer," I told my lead banker. "The Crawford deal is dead." At that exact moment, Miles Harrington, the chief investment officer of Harrington Capital, the largest shareholder of Crawford Holdings, was trapped in a gridlock traffic jam 3 blocks away. Sweat was beads on his forehead. Miles knew exactly what I looked like, and he knew that without my $1.3 billion, Crawford Holdings would be forced to declare bankruptcy by the end of the week. His phone rang. It was Vivian's secretary. "Hi, Miles," the secretary said cheerfully. "The gala is going beautifully. Has Lawrence Sinclair arrived yet?" Miles gripped the steering wheel. "I am stuck in traffic, but he should be there. Did you welcome him?" Well, the secretary hesitated. There was a minor issue at table 3. An older man was causing trouble over a seat, but Vivian had security escort him out. "He's gone." Miles felt the blood drain from his face. His heart stopped. "You escorted who out?" At that very moment, his phone buzzed with an automated alert from the banking system. The pending $1.3 billion capital injection from Sinclair Capital had been retracted. Reason: material breach of respect and ethics protocols. "Turn the car around," Miles screamed at his driver. "Not to the gala. We are going to Mr. Sinclair's residence immediately." The next morning at Crawford Holdings headquarters, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. On the 45th floor inside the executive suite, the morning briefing was underway. Vivian Crawford sat at the head of the glass conference table, her expression calm, though a sharp edge in her voice gave away her true feelings. "It was a minor misunderstanding," Vivian announced to the board, waving her hand dismissively. "An older man claiming to be an investor made a scene at table 3, and we had him removed to protect the integrity of the event. It is nothing that affects the big picture of our expansion." No one around the table dared to contradict her. They all knew the Crawford family controlled the board, and challenging Vivian was a quick way to end a career. In the hallway outside, Adrian Crawford was laughing on his phone. "It is all settled, babe," he said, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "That old man was just some social climber looking for a free meal and some attention. My mother tossed him out like trash. He won't be coming back, and we are already looking at other funding options." He thought his actions at the gala were just a minor detail, a brief moment of asserting his dominance that would have no real consequences. But on the 32nd floor, in the chief financial officer's wing, there was no laughter. The CFO, a seasoned man named Ronald Vance, stared at his computer screen. The cash flow chart was flatlining. "We are scheduled for Phase 1 capital allocation in 48 hours, Ronald said, his voice trembling as he looked at his senior analysts. "But the system is showing a zero balance in the escrow account." The Sinclair Capital wire transfer code was retracted last night. A junior analyst raised his hand timidly. "Can we request a delay from the contractors?" "A delay?" Ronald snapped. "A delay at this stage means we default on our construction bonds. If that happens, our credit rating drops to junk status by Friday. We don't just need a delay, we need a miracle." While the corporate tower was beginning to sweat, the atmosphere at my private residence was completely different. I sat on the veranda of my home, a quiet estate surrounded by old oak trees, sipping a cup of black coffee. The morning air was crisp, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves. Audrey stood beside me, her tablet in hand. She had a calm smile on her face. "The phone has been ringing since 6 a.m., Lawrence," she said. "Miles Harrington has called 14 times. Vivian Crawford's office has called 8 times. They even tried to contact your personal attorney." "Let them ring," I replied, taking a slow sip. A man who cannot control his own family cannot be trusted to control a billion-dollar corporate expansion. Arrogance is a disease that eventually destroys the host. I am simply letting the disease run its course. Before Audrey could reply, the security gate at the edge of the driveway opened. A black sedan pulled up, and Miles Harrington stepped out. He looked disheveled, his tie crooked, and sweat staining the collar of his shirt. He practically ran up the stone steps to the veranda. "Mr. Sinclair," Miles gasped, catching his breath. "Thank you for seeing me. I went to the gala last night, but by the time I arrived you were already gone." I pointed to an empty chair opposite me. "Sit down, Miles. Have some coffee." "I don't have time for coffee, Lawrence," Miles said, his voice cracking. "The board is in a panic. Vivian Crawford is trying to act like everything is under control, but the numbers don't lie. Without the $1.3 billion Sinclair capital injection, Crawford Holdings is facing technical insolvency by the end of the week. My father, Gordon, is furious. He wants to know if there is any way to salvage this deal." I leaned back in my chair, looking at him. "Miles, I have known your father for 20 years. I respect Harrington Capital. But my terms were clear. I do not partner with people who treat basic human respect as a luxury they can ignore." Adrian Crawford threw my name card on the floor and stepped on it. Vivian Crawford ordered security to escort me out like a common criminal. They made their choice. Now, they must live with the cost. Miles buried his face in his hands. "I know. I saw the video. It's already circulating among the major shareholders. It looks terrible. But surely we can work out a solution? Perhaps a public apology? A change in the board structure?" "It's too late for simple apologies, Miles," I said. "But since you are here, I want to show you something." I nodded to Audrey. She tapped her tablet and slid it across the table toward Miles. "What is this?" Miles asked, squinting at the screen. While Vivian and her son were busy playing rulers of high society, my team was conducting a deep audit of Crawford Holdings' subsidiary accounts. I explained. "We wanted to ensure our $1.3 billion would be placed in a clean system. Instead, we found something very interesting." Audrey pointed to the document on the screen. "These are 3 separate short-term loan agreements signed over the last 6 months, totaling $85 million, she said. They were secured using Crawford Holdings' prime real estate assets as collateral. The loans were authorized by Adrian Crawford." Miles frowned. "Adrian is the vice president, but he doesn't have the authority to pledge prime corporate assets without a full board resolution and the CEO's signature." "Precisely," I said. "And if you look at the board resolutions attached to those loans, you will see Vivian Crawford's signature. But look at the dates. On the date of the second loan, Vivian was in Switzerland for a medical checkup, completely off the grid. On the date of the third loan, she was in Tokyo." Our handwriting experts analyzed the signatures. "They are highly sophisticated copies." Miles's eyes widened. His face turned from pale to completely white. "You are saying Adrian forged his mother's signature to get loans?" Audrey nodded. "Yes. And he did it using a subsidiary company, registered in Delaware, that operates outside the main audit loop. The funds from those loans didn't go to Crawford projects. They were funneled into a private shell company controlled by Adrian and his girlfriend." I looked at Miles, whose hands were now shaking. "Under California Penal Code Section 470, forgery is a felony. More importantly, because those signatures were forged, the loan agreements are void ab initio. They are legally invalid from the very beginning. The moment the banks find out, they will declare a default and call in the loans immediately." Miles stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. "This is fraud. If this gets out, the stock will crash. Crawford Holdings won't just go bankrupt. The family will go to prison. Which is why you need to decide where Harrington Capital stands, Miles," I said quietly. "You are the largest shareholder. You can either sink with the Crawford family, or you can help me clear the wreckage." Miles stared at the tablet, then at me. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell your father to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," I said. "And tell him to keep his phone on. The real storm hasn't even started yet. By Wednesday afternoon, the video from the gala was no longer a private secret among the wealthy. It had leaked onto public social media platforms under a title that spread like wildfire: "The price of a VIP seat at the Crawford table." The footage was crystal clear. It showed Adrian Crawford throwing my silver name card to the ground and stomping on it. It showed Vivian Crawford, draped in diamonds, looking down her nose at me and ordering security to drag me out through the service exit like garbage. The contrast between my quiet, calm demeanor and the Crawford family's raw arrogance was striking. By the time the markets opened, the video had reached 5 million views. Crawford Holdings' public image was shattered. Shareholders saw a family that didn't just lack respect, but lacked basic sanity, tossing away a $1.3 billion lifeline to satisfy the petty whims of an entitled son. Within the first 2 hours of trading, Crawford Holdings stock plummeted by 18%. erasing nearly $400 million in market capitalization. At the Sinclair Capital Legal Office in downtown Chicago, my team of attorneys was already moving. They filed a massive lawsuit in the Delaware Court of Chancery. The legal complaint was not just a simple breach of contract, it was a direct blow aimed at Vivian Crawford's position. Audrey walked into my office carrying a printed copy of the filing. "It's official, Lawrence," she said. "The lawsuit is filed. We are suing Vivian Crawford personally for a breach of fiduciary duty." "Explain the core of the suit for the record, Audrey," I said, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the skyline. Audrey looked at the papers. "Under corporate law, Vivian, as CEO and director, owes a fiduciary duty of care, loyalty, and good faith to Crawford Holdings and its shareholders. By ejecting the lead investor of a critical $1.3 billion deal over a minor seating dispute involving her son's girlfriend, she acted in bad faith. Her actions directly caused the collapse of the funding deal and the subsequent 18% drop in the company's valuation. We are seeking damages and a court-ordered injunction to freeze her executive powers." "Perfect," I replied. "Let's see how long her pride holds up under this pressure." Over at the Crawford Holdings headquarters, the atmosphere was chaotic. The phone lines in the public relations office were jammed with calls from furious institutional investors. In the executive suite, Vivian Crawford sat, staring at the legal complaint that had just been hand-delivered to her desk. Her hands were trembling slightly as she picked up her phone and called the company's chief legal counsel, a veteran attorney named Marcus. "What is this garbage Sinclair filed?" Vivian demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Breach of fiduciary duty? That's ridiculous. It was a private event. I have the right to remove anyone I want from my party." There is a long pause on the other end of the line. "Vivian," Marcus said, his voice flat, "this isn't a private party issue. You were there in your capacity as CEO of a publicly traded company. The gala was funded by corporate money to secure investors. The video shows you throwing out the very investor who was bringing in $1.3 billion. The court will see this as gross negligence and bad faith. If this goes to trial, you will lose. The board can hold you personally liable for the lost valuation." Vivian slammed the phone down. At that moment, Adrian walked into the office, holding a cup of coffee. He looked slightly annoyed but still carried his usual smug expression. "Mom, have you seen the stock price?" Adrian asked. "Some stupid activists are calling for a boycott of our retail centers. People are so sensitive these days." It was just a chair. Vivian stood up, her eyes blazing with a rage Adrian had never seen before. "Just a chair?" Vivian screamed, her voice echoing through the double doors. "That chair just cost us $400 million in market value in 2 hours. That chair has brought a federal-level lawsuit to my desk. Your arrogant behavior last night is destroying everything I built." Adrian's smug look finally vanished. He took a step back, setting his coffee down. "Mom, we can just find another investor. There are plenty of funds in New York." "No, there are not," Vivian yelled. "No serious firm will touch us now. The video proves we are unstable. No one is going to hand $1.3 billion to a company where the CEO's son can throw the representatives out of a room on a whim." Before Adrian could reply, Vivian's desk phone buzzed. It was the private line. The caller ID read, "Gordon Harrington." Vivian took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, and picked up the receiver. "Gordon, I was just about to call you. I don't want to hear your explanations, Vivian." Gordon Harrington's voice was like ice. His tone was heavy, carrying the weight of a man who owned 35% of her company. "My son Miles came back from Lawrence Sinclair's house this morning. He told me everything. It was just a minor misunderstanding at the party." Vivian started, her voice cracking. Adrian was just, "Enough!" Gordon interrupted. "Your son is a parasite, Vivian, and you have proven to be a massive liability to this corporation. Your pride has cost my fund over $100 million in paper losses today. I have called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9:10 a.m. We are going to address this." Vivian's eyes narrowed, her old defensive instincts kicking in. "You can't force me out, Gordon. My family still controls 40% of the voting shares. The board cannot remove me without my consent." "We will see about that, Vivian," Gordon said quietly. "You might control the shares, but you do not control the law. I advise you to prepare your defense, because tomorrow you are going to need it." The line went dead. Vivian slowly lowered the phone, her face pale. She turned to Adrian, who was standing quietly near the door. "Get your lawyers, Adrian," Vivian whispered, a cold dread finally settling in her chest. Tomorrow is going to be a war. She thought she was ready for the fight. She believed her 40% voting bloc was an impenetrable wall that would protect her family's empire. But she had no idea that the real weapon I was holding was not the lawsuit. It was the forged documents sitting on my desk, waiting to be revealed. The morning of the emergency board meeting, the conference room on the 45th floor of Crawford Holdings felt like a courtroom. Outside, the rain was pouring against the glass windows. Inside, the silence was deafening. Vivian Crawford and Adrian Crawford arrived early, dressed in high-end designer suits, attempting to project an image of absolute control. They sat on one side of the mahogany table. On the other side sat Gordon Harrington and Miles Harrington, along with 4 other major board members. At exactly 9 a.m., the heavy double doors of the boardroom opened, but it wasn't a secretary entering. I walked in, followed by Audrey and our lead corporate attorney, a man named Henderson, who carried a thick black leather briefcase. Vivian's eyes flared with anger. She stood up immediately. "This is a closed board meeting, Lawrence," she hissed. "You have no standing here. You retracted your investment. You are an outsider." I calmly walked to the head of the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. I set my ruined silver name card from the gala right in front of me. "Actually, Vivian, I have every right to be here," I replied, my voice cool and even. "I was invited by Gordon Harrington, who represents 35% of the voting shares. And more importantly, I am here as the largest creditor of this corporation." Vivian let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Creditor? Our debt is held by commercial banks. You don't own a single bond." I nodded to Henderson. He opened the briefcase and slid a stack of legal documents across the table. One set went to Gordon, and the other went directly to Vivian. "Yesterday, Sinclair Capital purchased $85 million in short-term promissory notes from West Coast Capital," Henderson explained, his voice professional and dry. "These notes were secured using 3 of Crawford Holdings' premier retail properties as collateral. The documents were signed and authorized by Adrian Crawford, acting as Vice President of Business Development." Vivian frowned, turning to Adrian. "Adrian, what is he talking about?" "You don't have the authority to sign for those loans without my countersignature." I smiled slightly. "She is correct, Adrian. You didn't have the authority. But you solved that problem by simply signing her name for her." The room went dead silent. "On page 3 of the document, you will see a detailed forensic handwriting analysis," I said, looking directly at Vivian. "And on page 5, you will see the digital audit trail." The electronic signature file for Vivian Crawford was accessed from an IP address registered to Adrian's private penthouse on a Tuesday night at 11:30 p.m. On that exact date and time, Vivian, you were in Zurich, Switzerland, attending a medical conference. You had no internet access. Adrian's face turned from a flush of anger to a pale, sweating mask. "This is a lie," Adrian shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It's a setup. They hacked the system." "Silence!" Gordon Harrington roared, his voice shaking the glass walls. He glared at Adrian. "Shut your mouth," Henderson continued, ignoring Adrian's outburst. "Under California Penal Code Section 470, forgery is a felony. Because the authorization documents were forged, the loan agreements are void ab initio. They are legally invalid from the very beginning. West Coast Capital has already declared a material fraud default, and since Sinclair Capital now owns those notes, we have issued an immediate demand for acceleration. We want our $85 million back within 24 hours. Vivian stared at the documents, her eyes wide with horror. She slowly turned her head to look at her son. "Adrian, tell me this is a mistake," she whispered. "Tell me you didn't do this." Adrian couldn't look her in the eye. He stared down at the table, his breathing shallow. "Vivian," I said, leaning forward, "it gets much worse. Because Crawford Holdings cannot pay $85 million in 24 hours, the cross-default clauses on your other $300 million in commercial loans have just been triggered. The banks were notified of the fraud default at 8:30 a.m. As of 9:15 a.m., all of Crawford Holdings' primary operating accounts have been frozen. You are technically insolvent." Vivian slumped back into her leather chair. The pride, the arrogance, the shield of her family name, all of it evaporated in a single second. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was standing on a trapdoor, and the rope had just been pulled. "This is criminal misconduct," Gordon Harrington said, looking at Vivian with absolute disgust. "The corporate veil is pierced. You and Adrian are personally liable for this fraud. The banks will come after your personal estates, your houses, your cars, everything. You will be facing bankruptcy and a federal prison sentence." "There is a way out, Vivian," I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes desperate, clinging to any shred of hope. "What? What do you want?" Sinclair Capital will buy out the Crawford family's 40% voting block, I said. We will pay you exactly 20 cents on the dollar based on yesterday's market close. That money will not go to you. It will go directly to pay off the $85 million forged debt, clearing the criminal liability and saving your son from immediate prosecution, Vivian gasped. 20 cents? That is pennies. We built this company. You destroyed it, I replied, pointing to the ruined name card on the table. You destroyed it the moment you let your arrogance blind you. You thought money gave you the right to treat people like trash. You thought a seat at a table made you untouchable. Now, you don't even own the room. I stood up, adjusting my suit. You have until 12 p.m. to sign the transfer papers and submit your unconditional resignations from all executive positions. If you sign, the debt is cleared and you walk away with your freedom, though you will be broke. If you don't sign, the district attorney will have warrants for both of your arrests by 1 p.m. I turned and walked toward the exit, Audrey and Henderson behind me. Lawrence, Vivian called out, her voice cracking, completely devoid of the ice she had held the night before. Please, I didn't stop. I walked through the double doors, leaving the boardroom to its silent panic.